Welcome to a special series of the Reimagine podcast. These podcasts were created in partnership between Nassau Reimagine, Nassau Financial Group, and the Barney School of Business at the University of Hartford. In the next few weeks, we will explore the frontiers of risk and innovation. Join the Reimagine team, Barney's faculty and students, and leading thinkers in the sector to explore how technology, science, and entrepreneurship will shape the future of risk management. In today's episode, we will discuss the evolving focus and adoption of risk management at the organization or risk owner level, and see how it is leading to changes in the approaches to risk management and risk financing. Today, many emerging and systemic risks are becoming uninsurable. Examples include climate change, cybersecurity, supply chain disruptions. The evolving trends are now leading to the use of traditional insurance to its maximum viability and supplementing risk management and risk financing with alternative capital. This integrated approach offers organizations significant opportunities for asset and balance sheet protection for the adverse consequences of emerging and systemic risk events.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast, but it actually is a special one, and it's actually unique in that it's just going to be a series of podcasts we're doing in partnership with Laura. I'll kick it over to you to talk and
Absolutely.
Introduce our new partner.
Sure, and we are happy to have them here today. Today's conversation, as Paul mentioned, is the first in the Innovation and Risk podcast series. So we're producing this in partnership with the University of Hartford Barney School of Business. We have great partners in the Barney School, and Assistant Dean John Thompson is with us and wearing many hats. You may recognize him or his voice from previous episodes, but we've come together to create educational content that showcases startups, intellectuals, and individuals advancing the future of finance. So we're excited about the podcast series, excited about partnering with the Barney School of Business at University of Hartford. And now I'll hand it over to John Thompson to briefly introduce himself and then share with us the guests we have here today.
Great. Well, thanks, Laura. It's good to be on the podcast with you and Paul again. It's a great vehicle for learning and for addressing innovations in risk and in finance. So anyway, I'm John Thompson. I'm the assistant dean here in the Barney School. I joined the Barney School 3 years ago as a practitioner. I had spent a 35-year career in finance and healthcare and insurance, and I joined the Barney School here in the as a part-time teacher and a part-time administrator in the leading the transformation of the Barney School. So that I'll turn it over to Marcus Schmalbach, to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Marcus. I'm from Berlin, Germany. I have two jobs. I'm the CEO of RYSKEX, which is a fintech company based in Berlin, but also in New York City. Beside that, I'm a professor for artificial intelligence and blockchain with ESCP Business School based in Paris, but also in Berlin. And happy to be here today talking about alternative risk financing.
Great. And Guruk Nagpal, he's with us today. Guruk is a graduate student here at the university. Guruk, could you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you, Professor Thompson. I'm actually a graduate student at the University of Hartford, the Barney School of Business right now. What I'm studying is a dual degree program, which entails an MBA and a concentration in accounting and a Master of Science in Business Analytics. Kind of talk about my background. I also did a double major in my undergrad with accounting and risk management and insurance. So kind of ties in with the relevance to the topic as well, with kind of talking about finance and risk management and insurance at the same time.
Excellent.
Great. Well, Guruk, why don't you kind of take over and kind of lead our questions?
So I believe because we're talking about alternative risk financing today, I feel like the first thing that we should kind of jot down is the definition of risk and what we actually mean when we talk about risk. We kind of throw this word around a lot, but it's really important to see what is actually meant by risk, and then we can move forward into other keywords which entail with this topic today.
Gurik, I'm really glad you brought up that distinction because in the legacy times, we used to use the terms insurance and risk almost synonymously or as synonyms and meaning the same thing. And in fact, they're really quite different things. Risk is basically defined, I think, from a textbook standpoint as any measured deviation from an expected outcome or event. There's two basic types of risks: pure risks and speculative risks. But risk is basically that event that's there. Insurance is a tool for financing risk. It isn't the same thing as risk, and it typically finances pure risks, which are the downside impacts of a risk or a risk event. And it's historically been used as a primary tool for financing risk to transfer from the risk owner, which is the company which has the exposures, and they can transfer that risk to a third party insurance company. What's happened over time is that there's been this evolution of change of risks and the orientation of risks, and that's actually starting to change the risk landscape. So many risks that were previously insurable are no longer insurable, and we'll talk more about that later. But that's basically looking at that distinction between risk and insurance, and understanding the differences and how they can still are important, but they how they interplay and are managed is changing significantly.
Sounds good, Professor Thompson. From what I understand, risk management is probably the bigger question at play, while insurance is only one of the answers to it. And again, we need to kind of open our eyes to more alternative risk financing methods and options as well. Dr. Marcus, in your opinion, though, how do you think that risk management has evolved to respond to this changing understanding of risk today?
I guess the risk landscape itself changed a lot, and due to the fact that that we are living in a digitized, globalized world, the impact is felt, yeah, globally. Finally, as we may see currently what's happening in the Ukraine, but you see that all around the world, the impact by things like that. Likewise, we saw that with the pandemic. If it would just be in China, it would have been an epidemic, but we had a pandemic, a global pandemic for more than 2 years. And so these are risks which can have a really great impact on the balance sheet of companies. And so I guess a completely difference to the 50 years ago or more likely, where the companies are working in silos and maybe in a national area and not in that global linked with each other value chains and supply chains. And so risk is definitely much more on the list of a CFO and a CEO when it was ever before.
Yeah, hey John, you made a statement. Maybe just I'll double click into that one, which was sometimes risks are insurable and sometimes they shift and they're not. Maybe you could just give us a real example of one where the dynamics have changed so much that you can't get insurance for it.
Well, I think there's a number of examples out there today. One that becomes right to, which is where we're still living through this, is the risks associated with a pandemic. It used to be that it was events were much simpler, and there weren't a sort of this what Marcus has taught me this perspective of systemic risk and how these risks, specifically like the virus risk associated with a pandemic, really has a systemic impact on an organization, meaning not only in terms of magnitude, but in terms of complexity and figuring out how is that actually ultimately impacting the organization. And a change has been where there were traditionally in insurance contracts exclusions for war, for example, but viruses were never thought of as being something that was excluded. And over time, the insurance industry has had adverse experience from that and has wound up starting to, in most contracts, exclude losses related to viruses. And when we have a pandemic like COVID-19, which is created by a virus, we have insurance contracts which aren't designed or intended to respond, and therefore that's an uninsurable type of a risk or event. Same can be turned, I guess, looking at things like associated with climate change, with windstorms. It used to be with now we have increased frequency and severity of Atlantic coast storms coming at us, and those risks are becoming uninsurable today because of the magnitude and the complexity of those situations. So there's another example of a risk that's become uninsurable or only maybe partially insurable.
Yeah, well, speaking of winds, I mean, I literally had 70-mile-an-hour winds hit my house last night and lost a good chunk of my roof. So it's happening more and more frequently. And Marcus, your scope of risk, are you looking at financial risk? Are you looking at health risks? Are you looking at climate risks in your work and the models you're building?
I would say what we call the top 4 risks we are having a closer look on is pandemic, terror, war, climate change, and cyber. So because we believe that these risks themselves have the hugest impact on the company, and so we are not, let's say, maybe silo thinking is a bit rude, but let's say we are not looking on each insurance line itself, but more likely starting from the idea of what is the impact to a company, what could be a real, chapter 7, chapter 11 scenario due to that kind of risks for them, and then starting to find solutions for them to help them out. Of course, if there's insurance available, let's buy it. Yeah, nothing beats a cheap insurance, is always said around. But if the insurance comes to an end and there's no solution on the market available, then we jump in and help out and try to create new solutions, alternative solutions for them to cover those risks and cover their balance sheet.
Mm-hmm. So clicking into that one level deeper, Marcus, talk to us about what improvements parametric insurance can deliver compared to traditional insurance. Are there certain things that stand out? And to even go one level higher, do you mind just giving a brief overview on parametric insurance for those who may not have heard it or are less familiar?
Okay. Frankly, you now said parametric insurance. I will talk about that a little later, where I believe a parametric is not by 100% an insurance solution. So let me try to find the best. Okay, let's start with a traditional insurance. A traditional insurance is based on the law of large numbers, and we normally have an indemnity insurance. Means I have a cover line for, let's say, $1 million, and my house gets somehow a fire, windstorm, whatever, and I have a claim, and then there's a claim adjustment process. And even I covered $1 million, I get maybe by the insurance company 560,000 because this is exactly to rebuild my house. So far, so clear, I guess. Parametric makes it in a bit different way. Parametric says, if there's, for example, a windstorm, then this is the trigger event itself. And then you normally add a second trigger and say the windstorm has been directly in my house and there has been somehow a trigger that has been really occurred, that you have a double trigger combination on that. Finally, what a parametric solution does not know, let's say so, is a claim adjustment process. This is the major difference between that. So why we do that. A parametric makes definitely sense when you get hit by something and you need money quick on your banking account. So you do not have a traditional insurance policy. It's more likely linked with predefined indices and triggers. And if that event occurs, then you get a payout for maybe rebuilding your house or whatever, rebuilding your company. A lot of opportunities. So to answer why I said I'm not talking about parametric insurance by 100%, there are parametric insurance around, but not every single solution which is parametric in a parametric way created is automatically an insurance. There's also the nice effect of parametric is that the capital market understands that, because it hits somehow a predefined index, or it does not. This is how the financial market is working, more likely. Yeah, oil price goes above, goes below, then I have to pay the other person some money or however. And you can adapt that solution, the parametric solution, to make it attractive for investment banks, hedge funds, whatever, to invest in those kind of risks. So from a regulation standpoint, parametric must not be an insurance. It can be, but it must not be an insurance. It can also be just a parametric. If we link that to the capital market, I would say a risk swap is more likely what also can be in a parametric way designed.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when I've learned a lot about that from Marcus, and one of the things that's become clear to me is that the if you're going to access the capital markets, the alternative capital forms other than insurance, the capital markets have no real understanding or patience with a long 35-page contract that governs whether or not a loss is covered. They either the event either happened or it didn't happen, or it happened with an established magnitude. That's one, and then number two, it can be independently verified. So there's really no debate about whether it happened or not. An independent third party can verify whether it happened or not, and it's not sort of say, well, maybe the insurance policy will respond, and then there's a significant period of time. The adjustment, as Marcus talked about, that process is very time consuming, and there's in business, time is money, and when someone's waiting to be paid, either their business is not getting back in business, or they have to find capital to get started to get back in business. And so it's important that the tools or structures like parametric designs can actually accelerate that reimbursement without a lot of the traditional contractual processes, which are very slow and cumbersome.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of go back to the topic of systemic emerging risks. You guys definitely answered and hit the right spots when it comes to parametric solutions for these risks. But like Dr. Smallbach mentioned, there's the pandemic, there's cyber, there's climate change. So even if you think about pandemic for 1 second, it's something which is probably low frequency but high severity. So again, the possibility and the frequency might be low, but then again, when something that like that hits, it's probably going to be catastrophic, and it's probably going to have a lot of high severity, right? Which is what kind of makes it hard for insurance companies to insure the risk, which makes it a non-insurable risk. Again, even with cyber, which has a lot of relevance even in the pandemic time, because we remember, and even right now, most of the people are still working from home or working remotely. So, when you work from home, not everyone has sophisticated or secured home networks to work through. So again, that also increases a lot of exposures, again, increases a lot of risks, which also makes it really hard to cover. Like, there are a lot of cyber coverages right now, but to cover it 100%, it's probably going to be something to think about in the future. It's probably pretty hard right now as well. Even with climate change, the one thing that I like about parametric solutions is that with climate change, some people might believe that, yeah, climate change is actually something that's happening. Some people actually don't believe it's something that's happening. But at the same time, because we use the word parametric, that just means that we're independently verifying something. So again, like you mentioned, Paul, if you had high winds last night, it's recorded. It is something that's independently verified. Now, if it ties into the bigger picture of, okay, that leads to climate change or it is a cause of climate change, that's a different discussion altogether. But we can independently verify things, which kind of really, I think, fast tracks the process of parametric solutions as well.
The University of Hartford Barney School of Business is recognized nationally and internationally for its ever-evolving curriculums, experiential learning opportunities, and innovative career-ready programs. The school has been ranked as one of the top business schools in the country by both Bloomberg Business and the Princeton Review. The school's AACSB accreditation places the Barney School among the top 5% of business schools in the world.
Yeah, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about alternative risks. So those risks that aren't insurable, how do I find coverage? How do I find coverage? I have a business and I'm a school district in Maryland, and I don't want my school. I think of what will happen if my school is hacked or I'm a victim of ransomware. How do I protect myself? Is this like Gurak, the 300-mile wind event? I can't get insurance, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, Paul, I think that actually Marcus could give us a really good example in terms of the sort of his model that Marcus and his team have developed that sort of provides a way of assessing that in terms of giving an independent risk index calculation with respect to the event, so that the risk taker can make a decision about the risk and how much they would like to expose themselves to it, much in the same way a traditional underwriter does with an insurance contract.
So, Marcus, can you solve my problem?
I hope so, but you are right. Saying there's no insurance, it's not that easy that you say, oh, no insurance available, so we find someone with the capital market because they are stupid enough to cover every single thing we offer them. This is at the end of the day, of course, not the case. What it's first of all nowadays time, it's about big data. Yeah, this is where all these nice artificial intelligence comes in, and where you can model something brand new. And then, as John already said, you have to find somehow an index which can be hit or not hit, because this is the first step to making people outside of the insurance industry getting an understanding what they are investing in. And then, yeah, frankly, it's a negotiation process. If we talk, for example, a pandemic, at Lloyd's, they would tell you a pandemic is a 1 in 100 risk. Means for the underwriter, it happens 1 in 100 years. We had that interesting discussion that even it's a 1 in 100 years risk, it can occur next year again, and then for the next 100 years, not anymore, and stuff like that. So it does not mean that if it's a 1 in 100, that it can just hit us once a lifetime and we are now free from every pandemic. So this is more likely the major problem with calculating risk like that. And here you have to bring in new models and define new ways of triggers which occur, and then you see what the appetite of the capital market is. If they say, I cover it for 10%, and the company who is the policyholder is happy with 10% paying against the pandemic because they said, oh, wow, 10% is even better than losing 100, then you have a deal, more likely. If they are saying, oh, we do it for 25%, and the company says, oh, no, okay, this is much too high, then you have another opportunity, and maybe you define different triggers or lower the sum or stuff like that. So to be honest, we are still in these kinder shoes where it's a tailor-made case in every single time, and not that scalable opportunity, which we are, of course, seeking for, to say, okay, now we have one single solution which works perfectly for your elementary school you mentioned or whatever it was. And we can say, okay, this works for every 100 other schools based in Michigan and whatever. And then you have a bit the scale up effect. This is at the moment, it's really still a tailor-made thing and a negotiation with two counterparts. Sometimes it's a chicken egg thing. A company is seeking for transferring risk, and the capital market has maybe an interest and an appetite on that because they say, okay, it works perfectly with my portfolio because, for example, I bet that Brent oil gets up in price, and so I'm happy to cover something around Europe at the moment because I have this is more likely a hedging opportunity for me. It's frankly it needs a bit of different mindset to traditional insurance.
Right.
And at the moment, the challenge for every company within parametric is making it scalable and attractive for the companies to invest in.
Marcus, I like the what was it, the Kinder shoes? I thought that was pretty good because that does pretty much define sort of when you talk about this. People would say a risk would happen, and it's a one in 100 year event. And if we go back 15 years now plus to Hurricane Rita and Katrina in New Orleans, both of those events were separate events. Both of them were actually 1 in 100 year events, but they occurred within the same month or 2 months period, very close. So in the kind of the traditional thinking of when someone would a 1 in 100 year event would occur, the kind of the naive or kindershoe belief would be, oh, I'm clear. The risk has happened, and I'm good for another 99 years before it'll happen again. And we've proven now quite in many examples that a 1 in 100 year event can happen multiple times within 1 year. And it's just a matter of we've got to change to this world we live in. And Marcus has developed this index around what we call VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And those are factors which really define a very complex risk world in which we find ourselves. And that's a way of sort of better categorizing a risk versus than saying its frequency. It really focuses more on the sort of the severity and don't take comfort in the fact that it's a 1 in 100 year event.
So VUCA, I love that. I love that. That's a good word. Marcus, tell us, how is technology, what type of role does technology play in calculating an index like that? And how does that translate into actual risk markets?
Yeah, to be honest, if you bring something new to the market, it must be somehow linked to the blockchain or artificial intelligence thing. Otherwise, the people would not believe that it's something new and needed, right? So in this special case, we use some machine learning things to create that VUCA World Risk Index. He's now at close to 80, and it's more likely programmed that way. If it reaches 80%. Then it's time to call Elon Musk and ask him to take him with you to Mars because 100% could never ever occur. No, then the world is over. And frankly, just one more sentence and then I will answer on the tech thing. If I go 3 years back in time, I didn't believe that there will be a war around Europe. I would not believe that there's a pandemic happening. And I'm a believer that the climate change is there. We can discuss if it's human driven or not human driven, but at the end of the day, we are in that situation. Okay, so and now another funny thing. Oh, sorry, it's not really funny, but let's talk about the cyber and the war thing, which is another thing. I read a lot of articles that the insurers currently say that due to the fact there's a Ukraine crisis and there are some Russian hackers around. That they will not cover any data breach or hacking attack or whatever because they argue that it's war and terrorism times, and this is excluded in the contract. Yeah, Paul, you make. I understand that, but as we talk about tech right now, the reason is they are more likely will be interesting how the judges will what their results will be, but you cannot, and this is the fun fact, you cannot say that it's not done by a Russian hacker. If you get hacked by someone with a proxy server which is on Cayman Island and whatever, you cannot outline where the hacking attack started, if it started in Ukraine, in Russia, in Caymans, in US, whatever. So if there's somewhere war in the world, you can always say, okay, was a hacking attack driven by the Russians, for example. Means this is another impact for cyber. And so now I'm talking for 2 minutes and you realize that we have war, climate change, cyber thing, which does not really works out, and the pandemic is still not over. So yeah, this is really a hard impact to the world at the end of the day. And so this is where the tech comes in, because for a human or even some human, it would be made hard to get all these informations linked. So what you need is a bunch of big data bringing together, and you need some smart data science to create somehow an algorithm who brings all these aspects of a VUCA world within one single algorithm. And then you have to pay trust, because no one, if someone tells you that he or her shows you the code of a machine learning algorithm, it's impossible. You have to trust the machine. We are looking every Monday what the machine is telling us, but we do not understand what's happening in the black box. This is why it's artificial intelligence and not human driven. And so this is another thing some people believe in and say, okay, yeah, why not? It's tech, no moral hazard, more likely given. But of course, there are many people out there who say, okay, I will not ever trust a machine. I want to understand it myself. Why is the VUCA World Index now with 75? And why is the premium now 3.4% and not just 1% if it's a 1 in 100 risk? And this is a very interesting thing coming up with this tech and this machine learning. But I guess it will still take some time, because the decision makers in the companies, either in the insurance companies or in the financial market companies or the fortune companies, they still have their issues in paying trust to artificial intelligence. Or if we talk about artificial intelligence, 98%, we mean machine learning.
Yeah, Garrick and John, I'm sure you watched the Super Bowl. Marcus, you're probably saying, "What was that?" Laura, Laura told me she downloaded one of those sports duel apps and started making some crazy bets on like what color Gatorade was going to be poured on a certain coach's head at what point in the game. It feels to me like, is this kind of the future of risk management? We just happen to see it on the consumer side. Is this any kind of model, do you think, for the commercial insurance sector? Is insuring this like long risk? Will we ever reduce it to, clicking a button on an app?
Well, I think, Paul, the interesting part is that we've moved from a world in risk management where times when things were simpler, when we could sort of live in a world of sort of basic risk management and basic compliance risk, and we sort of would look at things from loss minimization and so forth. And risk management in its infancy was more of what was akin to insurance management, because that was pretty much the risk financing tool that was used to manage most, if not all, risks, or at least all identified risks. But we've kind of found ourselves, when we rapidly move forward and what we've been through, yes, there's been a lot of incredible changes that Marcus outlined in the past 36 months. But if we go back to 2008 with the financial crisis and the impact of that type of event, and then we go back even further to what happened with in 2001 with the World Trade Center and that sort of event, the terrorism event. We've come through some very turbulent and very catastrophic type of events in the past 20 years that have necessitated us to take a different approach. And risk management has had to elevate it to a much higher level, where risk management was done by that insurance manager who was in the basement, and risk has to be managed in the C-suite and at the board of directors tables. And because of the impact that risk can have on an organization, particularly on its balance sheet and the assets on its balance sheet. So it requires a lot more involvement, engagement, more sophistication, using new technology to help map out the future, or understand a roadmap in terms of where we are and how do we protect the assets that our organization has that belong to our shareholders. And what happens if they're not insured? It could be catastrophic. And that takes this whole new having this culture of risk in risk management, where it's everyone's job, all the way from the boardroom down to the mailroom, if you will. So it's a very interesting time we find ourselves in, and sort of, in my opinion, it really brings these new dimensions of risk and risk of financing that organizations like Marcus's have developed, that will help complement what we've done in the past, but actually reflect this exaggerated risk world in which we live in today.
Yeah, and Mark, just to keep on that thread of finance risk, I think of just currency or FX risk. We've had lots of questions, come in, from media around Bitcoin. Oh my gosh, it's so risky. Well, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, more risky to hold Bitcoin or rubles? Fast forward today, it's like, wait a second, 2 weeks, the entire calculus has changed. I wouldn't necessarily have paired the two of those. How does time factor into your equation? Because it certainly can't be point in time risk for VUCA. It's got to have some type of a refresh rate. What is that risk refresh rate today?
Yeah. What we see is that the clients sometimes ask for single events, like you mentioned, the Super Bowl, and I've watched it. We have Germany too. So of course there are single events like a Super Bowl, where such a specific risk, where we did not cover anything with the Super Bowl, but we have seen something coming up with the Olympic Games 24 in Paris, for example. So this is sometimes really where the clients come along and say, okay, for this special period of one night, 4 or 5 days, whatever, we would love to cover these and that. And there, then the tech comes in, and you need to somehow create a premium which works for both parties. The longest solution we covered is 5 years, which is frankly untypically. Normally you cover it for 1 year maximum, and then you have to do a renewal, like in the insurance industry. Likewise, we use some tech then to say, after a year, okay, did we have some change? Yes, the risk, it's getting higher, getting lower a bit. So the fair price would be these and that, as we are independent. So for us, it's just giving both parties an advice. And if they are not happy with that, maybe they look for another one, or they find their own price together. We are just assisting them with some technology-driven data information and assist them with finding the right price. And if I have the choice between Bitcoin and ruble, I would maybe not invest in one of those.
A fair statement. So as we wrap up the conversation today, and I know we could keep going, and we'll just have to add on another episode within this series, but I'd be curious to hear, Marcus, from your perspective, what is your why? Why did you get into this? What gets you excited to wake up every morning and talk about, the work that you do and how important it is?
Oh, that's a really great question. I've learned that there are two kind of people out there, the why and the how people. And maybe I spend too much time in my life doing the how and less looking for the why. But yeah, as I said before, I'm working as a professor as well, so I'm a scientific-driven guy. I love this question why and not really the how. And yeah, that's it, more likely. And I started my career within Munich Re, Allianz, whatever. I worked for 15 years within our industry. So I think I have a clear understanding of our industry, but I saw that there is something beyond the insurance. I will just want to underline insurance is a wonderful solution for 95% or whatever risks existing out there. But there are some risks like the VUCA bonds who cannot be insured. Not because the insurers do not want that, but they are there and they have a huge impact if they occur. And this was the major question, as you mentioned, when I waked up in the morning and asked myself, how can we fight that? And this is more likely becoming my passion since 4 years now, bringing together new technological opportunities we have and finding solutions for these systemic VUCA emerging, whatever you name that, risks, which are not on a traditional insurance landscape.
Excellent. Garrick, any final questions or
Yeah,
thoughts?
definitely. I feel like when we talk about the future is definitely here because we have so much going on the last couple of years. Like, like we mentioned pandemic, we mentioned the war scenario, we mentioned cyber. Again, cyber is just so much out there with our kind of dependence on technology that, in every relevance, whether it be pandemic, whether it be data breaches, cyber kind of just kicks in as it is. So there's just so much to keep on learning and kind of accustoming or insurance policies or even the way we kind of finance our risks. I think we have to give it another thought as to kind of just reevaluating the current situation with, okay, we have so many different kind of risks. The scenario is not the same, the environment's not the same anymore. There's just so much more to deal with at this point right now. I feel like there's just so many different kind of risks. So I think one of the other interesting articles I was actually reading once was about the soccer player Roman Abramovich. He actually has a multi-billionaire insurance policy for sanctioned risks. So again, that's another thing to think about with everything going on. So again, are we going to be able to insure everything? But then there's also the question about the non-insurable risk at the same time. So I feel like what we need is more of like a new perspective in the industry, in the capital markets, in the insurance industry itself. And I feel like even from my own personal perspective, we need a new perspective from even the students' perspective. Like when we are teaching our students about RMI, risk management and insurance, we have to emphasize that, okay, yeah, there's so much going on in the news about insurance, but the bigger picture is always going to be about risk management. It's not going to be about insurance. Just because it's a big industry right now does not mean that's the bigger or overall thing to look at. Again, we have to tap into capital markets to even finance risks. So it's going to be about having a new perspective, is what I believe, in the industry, in professionals, in students, kind of overall. Yep.
Well, new perspectives, and John, right? That's what we hope to bring here. Do you want to take us home?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, to go back to the original question, and it's great to work with Marcus and particularly with Guruk here at the university. But I'm sort of a how guy in a why world, and that's kind of my that's what I enjoy being in a university setting, which is really all about why. And I love asking the how questions, and it's great to be able to interact with people like Marcus who think about why, and he can teach me about how things work, and then have students be able to interact with students like Guruk and sort of say we need to come up with new perspectives which start to bring the how and the why together. They don't exist independently, they actually coexist today. And I think that's sort of a lot of what we realize is as things don't live in discrete boxes and in discrete places, and everything starts to impact each other, and that creates a very interesting and challenging new world.
Well, hey, this is great. Hey, listen, we look forward to a real interesting journey, John, as we, dive deeper into the world of risk management, which, by the way, is not always insurance. So thanks for joining us, and tune in again for another interesting discussion. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Laura.
Marcus, thank you.
Thank you.
Eric?
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
The University of Hartford is based in Connecticut, an integral part of the tri-state region. The University of Hartford's Barney School of Business is recognized nationally and internationally for its ever-evolving curriculums, experiential learning opportunities, and innovative career-ready programs. The school has been ranked as one of the top business schools in the country by both Bloomberg Business and the Princeton Review. The school's AACSB accreditation places the Barney School among the top 5% of business schools in the world.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.